Hi, my name is Stuart Crose, and I will be reading an excerpt of Chapter 1 of Gert's Book of Knowledge, the second novel by P.J. Thomas. After Gert, I went back to men. The first time I saw her, she was a guest lecturer in a very dull sociology course. Not only was I impressed, I was in love. Gert was magnetic. She skimmed the room with her eyes like a lighthouse skims the surface of its waters. Now, when I see her, once a year or so, as family and work allow, she reminds me of my granny in the early stages of Alzheimer's disease. Gert now has a radiant smile and a faulty memory. She wears kaftans and saris, and often looks a little too chubby in her clothes. At our first meeting, she looked like a high priestess, bat-wing black hair, a high bosom, and a proud way of holding herself. She looked like a cross between a dated stereotype of a witch and a shark. She wore small metal jewelry and diamonds in her ears. She lectured on women in prison. She talked about women who kill their husbands, how typically, under normal circumstances, they are not killers and would never kill again. She was eloquent and rational, and I would never have expected her to lose her mind. During our introduction, my professor had said she taught at Queen's University, and I made plans to transfer there and become, under her tutelage, the finest sociologist specializing in prison reform that Canada had ever known. The fact that only half my plan came true doesn't leave me with regrets. For 30 years, my career centered around Gert and her writing, her cult following, and her quest for knowledge. If I described my work honestly, I would have to say that I was the right-hand man to a mad woman. Instead, I am described as a publisher, director of operations for a vast media marketing firm, a corporate psychotherapist, head of personnel for Grumpus, the financial management arm of the Starlight Church. My family and I still worship at the church, though Gert was relegated to figurehead some years ago and is left again to her studies. Her search now is without me. I finally met the love of my life 5 years ago. We've started a family and live on a horse ranch. Gert is in the desert with her cats. We're both happy, Gert and I, with too many memories to miss each other. Gert doesn't get much on paper these days. Back in the 1990s, I started as her scribe. I was still in awe of her, and when she offered me a research position, I asked her how high I should jump. She laughed then, and her laughter sounded like a silver bell. I was in, head over heels. She could do no wrong. As we started on the paper, I was eager to get an idea of the paradigm and start the research. She spoke circles and lyric sentences about women in the penal system. When I asked for detail or clarity, she waved me off. "Perhaps you should get this on paper," she had said. I couldn't figure out why she needed a human recorder. She could have got it all on computer. "I read your reactions and I trust them. You are the ears of every man," she told me. I tried to be a good listener. I kept copious notes of her every digression, but she never looked them over. It was as though she was the fountain, and the knowledge that flowed out was a gift, and it mattered not what was done with the gift, it was simply there. I tried to have intelligent responses, nodding, a pause in my writing, a raised eyebrow. She rarely looked at me. She strolled about her office, often gazing at a small sculpture, while she spoke of strip searches being used as a means of control, recidivism, and rehabilitation. She believed that female criminals were rare, that usually dire circumstances drove them to temporary criminal activity, and that jail merely lowered their chances of success in society. I could not at this point say that anything seemed amiss. In retrospect, perhaps she looked a little wistful, took longer pauses, delivered her point with less aplomb and more of a resigned fatality. She did not, however, appear to be in any trouble. She kept trying to expand and broaden her theories until they could be applied anywhere. "A truism's truth is not circumstantial," she used to say. I knew she was troubled the day she broke down. I was in my 3rd year and taking an honors course with Gert at the helm. That day I sat up front, and when she entered, I saw that her lipstick wasn't on straight and her skirt was askew. She had a bewildered look, as she began and then began again. She paused after her second introduction and then said, "That is all." Then she lay down behind the podium. The class sat in silence. As people began to get up and slip out, I walked up to Gert, bent down and took her hand. I got no response. I patted her hand and called her name, still nothing. I rang down to the office and told them to call an ambulance. The paramedics checked her vital signs, loaded her onto a stretcher and wheeled her out. I followed, dumbfounded, and they let me ride with Gert to the hospital. Once there, she was in with the doctor for over an hour. The emergency doctor, as well as the psychiatric resident, decided to admit her to the mental health ward. They asked me to come and talk with her, for all the good it did. I told her I'd be back the next day. I told her to get some rest. Rest she did for 8 months.